gonna take crackerjack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
When we think of influential directors from the 70s and 80s, names such as Scorsese, Zemeckis, Lucas, or Spielberg often pop up, but there's one US director that also began his career in the 1970s and who's arguably just as influential. That director is John Carpenter. Strangely, he was never really considered as cool as them. Maybe it's because Carpenter didn't necessarily enjoy the Oscar success of Spielberg or indeed the multi-million-dollar empire of him or Lucas. But John Carpenter's unique body of work, particularly that created during the extraordinary run that he had in the 70s and 80s, holds a particular fascination for a new generation of young filmmakers. The thing is that most films of Carpenter's career were initially commercial and critical failures. However, many of Carpenter's films from the 70s and 80s have come to be considered as cult classics, and he has been acknowledged as an influential filmmaker, even composing or co-composing most of his films as music, which isn't given to just any director. After several critical and commercial failures in the 70s, the movie that really struck gold for him was the 1978 movie Halloween, which kickstarted the slasher genre and a franchise that has lasted 40 years. Eventually, fans began retroactively heaping newfound love onto many of his other films like The Fog, Assault on Precinct 13, and Escape from New York, and have turned them into the cult classics that they are today. However, despite being known as one of the kings of cult phenomenons, Carpenter said in an interview for Variety that he's unfamiliar with the term. I have no idea what it means. I'm clueless. This in some way reminds us that directing isn't always about popularity. Some people just want to make movies because they have stories to tell, and if the crowd deems these movies to be cult classics, so be it. With that being said, John Carpenter really influenced my appreciation for movies, having grown up with many of his cult classics. Throughout his filmography, he has made quite a few amazing films. That's why in this video I want to explore a couple of my favorite movies of his and hopefully give you, the spectators, a reason to discover some of his cult classics or maybe revisit them. The first movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1978 film Halloween. Originally, Halloween stemmed from an idea suggested by producer Irwin Yablans, who wanted to make a movie titled The Babysitter Murders, who thought of a film about babysitters being menaced by a stalker. Carpenter took the idea and another suggestion from Yablans that it occurred during Halloween and developed a story around that. Carpenter said of the basic concept, Halloween night, it has never been the theme of a film. My idea was to do an old haunted house film. As for the film itself, it starts on Halloween night 1963. Police are called to 43 Lambkin Lane only to discover that 15-year-old Judith Myers has been stabbed to death by her 6-year-old brother Michael. After being institutionalized for 15 years, Myers breaks out on the night before Halloween. No one knows nor wants to find out what will happen on October 31st, 1978, besides Myers' psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis. He knows Michael is coming back to Haddonfield, but by the time the town realizes what is happening, many people have already become victims to Myers' psychosis. This film became a huge success despite having a very tight budget of only $300,000. Because of the low budget, wardrobe and props were often crafted from items on hand or that could be purchased inexpensively. On an interesting note, Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer, trying to stay within the budget, created the trademark mask worn by Michael Myers throughout the film from a Captain Kirk mask purchased for $1.98 from a costume shop on Hollywood Boulevard. Carpenter recalled how Wallace widened the eye holes and spray painted the flesh a bluish white. In the script it said Michael Myers' mask had the pale features of a human face and it truly was spooky looking. Hill adds that the idea was to make him almost humorless, faceless, this sort of pale visage that could resemble a human or not. The second movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1981 film Escape from New York. John Carpenter originally wrote the screenplay for Escape from New York in 1976 in the aftermath of Nixon's Watergate scandal. Carpenter said the whole feeling of the nation was one of real cynicism about the president. He wrote the screenplay, but no studio wanted to make it because, according to Carpenter, it was too violent, too scary, and in some ways too weird. He had been inspired by the film Death Wish, which was very popular at the time. He did not agree with the film's philosophy, but liked how it conveyed the sense of New York as a kind of jungle, and he wanted to make a science fiction film along those lines. In the dystopian 1988, the US turned Manhattan, New York into a maximum security prison where the most brutal criminals are residing for life due to the 400% rise in crime rates. There's no way for them to escape as the bridges are filled with mines, a large wall is built around the shoreline, and a police force army is based there to take out any attempted escapees. Snake Plissken, a one-eyed former soldier turned bank robber, arrives at New York after being sentenced to life imprisoned in New York City. After Air Force One crashes in Manhattan with the President of the United States in it, Bob Hawke, a police commissioner who runs the New York penal colony, gives Snake a job for his freedom. Rescue the President of the United States and retrieve a cassette containing vital information in exchange for his freedom. Upon accepting the mission, Hawke has Snake implanted with a bomb which is programmed to detonate in 22 hours if he fails the mission. Entering New York in 22 hours before the bomb's detonation, Snake sets out to rescue the president, trapped in New York and held hostage by a ruthless warlord known as the Duke of New York. On an interesting note about the film, Carpenter wanted to create two distinct looks for the movie. One which was the police state, with high tech, lots of neon, dominated by underground computers. The other was the Manhattan Island prison sequences, which had few lights, mainly torchlights, like feudal England. To create that type of atmosphere, certain matte paintings were rendered by James Cameron, who was at the time a special effects artist with Roger Corman's New World Pictures. Cameron was also one of the directors of photography on the film. As Snake pilots the glider into the city, 3 screens on his control panel display wireframe animations of the landing target on the World Trade Center and surrounding buildings. Carpenter wanted high-tech computer graphics, which were very expensive, even for such a simple animation. The effects crew filmed the miniature model set of New York City they used for other scenes under black light, with reflective tape placed along every edge of the model buildings. Only the tape is visible and appears to be a 3-dimensional wireframe animation. Upon release, the film received positive reviews from critics and was a commercial success, grossing more than $25 million at the box office. It was even nominated for 4 Saturn Awards, including Best Science Fiction Film and Best Direction. The film became a cult classic and was followed by a sequel, Escape from LA, released in 1996, which was also directed and written by Carpenter and starred Russell, but was much less favorably received. The third movie that I would like to highlight is the 1984 film Starman. This movie spent 5 years in development at Columbia. Thing is that producers at Columbia were concerned at the initial box office returns for E.T., feeling that Starman was too similar. Because of this, the screenwriter of Starman, Dean Reisner, was charged with keeping the script essentially the same while simultaneously making it distinct from E.T. and would work with 3 subsequent directors, Tony Scott, Peter Hyams, and finally John Carpenter. Whereas Scott was more interested in style than narrative drive and wanted to cast Philip Anglim, and Hyams pushed for a more conventional science fiction approach, Carpenter, who was eager to shed his image as a maker of exploitative thrillers, wished to emphasize the cross-country rapport that develops between the 2 leads, a la Defiant Ones, The 39 Steps, and It Happened One Night over special effects. Reisner dropped the heavy political implications from the script in order to comply with this. In 1977, the Voyager 2 travels to outer space with messages of peace and greetings from Earth. Answering the NASA message, a small alien spacecraft comes to Earth to make contact with Earthlings, but an American missile grounds the alien's ship. Upon crashing, the alien wanders in a form of energy to the house of the young widow Jenny Hayden, where he uses the DNA from a hair of her husband Scott to take his human form. The Starman contacts his mothership, where they tell him that he needs to be in a crater in Arizona in a couple of days to return to his star. Not wanting to be left behind on Earth, the Starman forces Jenny to take him to Arizona. Jenny is hostile towards the alien in the beginning, however she learns that he is a peaceful being, and because of that she chooses to help him. However, the army is chasing them, and the despicable NSA chief George Fox wants to hunt him down. On the other hand, SETI scientist Mark Sherman wants to help the Starman as he is sure the alien has come to visit Earth peacefully. While being pursued by military officials, Starman forges a lasting bond with Jenny. Upon its release, the film received positive reviews but faltered in its initial box office debut. Bridges was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in it, and it even inspired a short-lived television series of the same name in 1986. Again, like a lot of Carpenter films, it may not have been very noticed on its original release, but through time it has garnered a following that still prevails to this day. Speaking of cult classics, the fourth film that I'd like to mention is Big Trouble in Little China. Even though it was a commercial failure, grossing only $11.1 million in North America, below its estimated $19 to $25 million budget, the film has become amongst the most famous amongst Carpenter projects. It's crazy to think how popular this movie is in today's world because at the time of its release and initial failure, Carpenter became disillusioned with Hollywood, and its failure highly influenced Carpenter's decision to return to independent filmmaking for his subsequent projects. Although the original screenplay by first-time screenwriters Gary Goldman and David Z was set in the 1880s, screenwriter W.D. Richter was hired to rewrite the script extensively and modernize it. The studio subsequently hired Carpenter to direct the film and rushed Big Trouble in Little China into production so that it would be released before a similarly themed Eddie Murphy film came out, The Golden Child, which was slated to come out around the same time. This project fulfilled Carpenter's long-standing desire to make a martial arts film and follows trucker Jack Burton, who arrives in a small town to deliver his cargo. Once there, he decides he might as well win a few bucks playing cards with the locals down at the Chinese market. Practically bankrupting nearly all of his opponents, his friend Wang bets him a game of double or nothing to try and regain his cash and loses. Jack wants his well-earned money, but Wang explains he doesn't have the cash on him and that he'll pay later because he's due to pick up a long-lost girlfriend from the airport. Convinced Wang's pulling something sly, Jack insists he drives Wang to the airport so they can stick together. However, at the airport, Wang's girlfriend is captured by the Lords of Death, a streetwise Chinatown gang. She is essential for an upcoming plan to revive a 1,000-year-old Chinese sorcerer and bring him back to the world as a mortal being. So begins a daring adventure to rescue Wang's girl and stop the ruthless operation that's going on down in Little China. Teaming up with a cast of very different individuals, Jack and Wang delve deep into an uncovering conspiracy in which everything's not exactly as it seems. As mentioned, this movie was a financial failure. Because of this, Carpenter struggled to get more films financed. He did resume making lower-budget films such as Prince of Darkness in 1987, a film influenced by the BBC series Quatermass, but because of this low-budget film streak, he ended up directing the 1988 film They Live, which is my all-time favorite project of his. The idea for this film came from a short story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson, originally published in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction in November 1963, involving an alien invasion in the tradition of invasion of the body snatchers. They Live follows the story of John Nada, who is a man without a job, simply walking around Los Angeles trying to find something to do. He finally finds a job as a worker and a place to spend the night, but one day something strange happens to him. He discovers a pair of sunglasses through which he can see the true face of the people around him. What's scary is that many people in his city are in fact aliens, and most of them are actually important members of society. By keeping humans in ignorance, they rule the world as they like. John Nada goes on a search looking for the makers of the sunglasses and joins them in the fight against the aliens. The political elements of the film are derived from John Carpenter's growing distaste with the ever-increasing commercialization of the 1980s popular culture and politics, particularly the influence of Reaganomics, the economic policies promoted by US President Ronald Reagan. He remarked in Carpenter's concept, the picture's premise is that the Reagan Revolution is run by aliens from another galaxy. Free enterprises from outer space have taken over the world and are exploiting Earth as if it's a third world planet. As soon as they exhaust all our resources, they'll move on to another world. To this end, Carpenter thought of sunglasses as being the tool to seeing the truth, which is seeing in black and white. It's as if the aliens have colonized us. In John Carpenter's words, they want to own all our businesses. The aliens were deliberately made to look like ghouls, according to Carpenter, who said the creatures are corrupting us, so they themselves are corruptions of human beings. Well, that's it. This concludes my retrospective look on my favorite John Carpenter films. I know that I didn't speak about all his projects. Some other noteworthy movies of his are The Thing, Christine, Village of the Damned, and Vampires, but I did want to keep it to my favorites. After all, if you are impressed by the movies I spoke about, there's nothing stopping you from watching all his other projects. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Leave me a comment too and let me know what your favorite John Carpenter film is. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.